just ended. We will begin around 10:50, 11 a.m. So if you could just be patient with us as we transition. But we will begin shortly with the badge work for Space Science Master at the ambassador level.
Yeah.
Space science master. Okay, that sounds kind of.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Lakia Gaines. I am the program director of the Kathy Navaja Girl Scout Leadership Center here in Columbia, South Carolina, with our Mountains to Millings Council. And in partnership with the Girl Scouts of Eastern South Carolina, we are presenting with you today on the badge work for our Space Science Master at the ambassador level. So just want to do a quick check to make sure that one, everyone can hear me, and two, make sure that everyone is able to see our screen. So if you could briefly, quickly type in yes, in addition to letting us know where you're joining us from today. All right, great. I see some attendees joining us from North Augusta, Wake Forest, North Carolina, all the way from Vine Grove, Kentucky. And thank you to everyone else that is currently on. So just in case you cannot hear me or see me, please make sure that you check the settings on your device, whether it be your laptop and or your cell phone. But we have a special treat for us today, for you today. All right, we have joining us today, but we're going to complete the Space Science Ambassador level badge, and we're going to complete steps 1 and 2 today. 1 is discover worlds beyond Earth, and step 2 is to dive into NASA. And joining us today, we have Ms. Lauren Stover from Troop 2900, and also Tasia Owens, who is a senior communications specialist with NASA. So I believe that everyone should be able to see Lauren and Tasia. If you cannot, please let me know. So good morning, Tasia. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, and I'm thinking we're waiting on to see if Lauren can hear us. Well, today with our badge, badge step 1 is to you have 2 choices. Design a habitat for an alien world, or you can make a postcard or a tourist brochure from another planet. And then step 2 that we're going to talk about today is diving into NASA science. Hence, we have our expert, Tasia Owens. And Tasia, who is that's joining you today?
This is my daughter, Lily. She is a brownie out here in Oregon, where we live. So she's a brownie with the Oregon and Southwest Washington Council.
Okay.
Troop 10624.
Well, thank you for joining us. So while we are, so we can go ahead and start with step 2, dive into NASA. Please tell us more about what is your role, what is your title at NASA, and what are some things that you do in your role?
Yeah, definitely. So I work, I wear a lot of hats actually. So I work 3 different jobs with NASA that all make one giant full-time job, but probably more than that. I have, so I work primarily on a publication called Earth Observatory for Kids. You guys can probably see, oh, thanks, Lils. Just behind me here is the website that I run. I'm the managing editor for that. So I write an article and activity for kids almost monthly that we publish as part of the Earth Observatory website, which is the larger parent website of it. So we try and make sure that science can be fun and engaging, because doing science is way more fun than just reading about science. So that's one thing that I do. I'm actually in the process of, the reason this whole thing's behind me is I'm in the process of recording some material for Facebook that'll be going out from the NASA channel later in the coming weeks. So if you follow NASA at all on your Facebook pages or Twitter accounts, you might be seeing my face wearing things like goggles and doing a few science experiments right here from my house. The other thing that I do is I work on Globe Observer, which is a citizen science program where we take land cover and cloud observations along with tree height measurements and mapping mosquito habitats. And then in 2017, when the eclipse came through, I got to work on that project as well. So that's also one of the apps that we had as part of that citizen science project. So you can download that app if you just put in Google into your Google Play Store or your App Store, put in Globe Observer, and that'll pop up for you, and you can download it and get started. And I actually see that in one of the parts from this space science master badge that it's back in the one of the last parts is how getting engaged piece, I believe. Or dig deeper maybe. Anyway, it's a pretty amazing opportunity where people, anyone, can just go out and be scientists by taking observations, taking cloud measurements or pictures using your cell phone. You just basically hold it up and then do one in each direction, and then classify what kind of clouds you're seeing. Same thing with land cover. You can go out and take pictures of even your backyard right now, and then classify those as well. So you might have things like patio, which would be an urban land cover. You might have forests, or you might live on a farm, which would be a different type of land cover. I live in Portland, Oregon, so I have really big trees in my backyard. We're known for our really tall trees. So that's also one of the things, is that I have a little bit of a forest in my backyard, so I can identify that. And then the different heights of trees are really important as well, because it tells us a lot about a different type of landscape and how much oxygen is made and how much carbon dioxide is brought in through the trees, to tell us a lot about our atmosphere, actually, as well as our land cover. So I also can measure one of those giant trees using the land cover, or using the tree height app. And later this year, we're hoping to launch a tree height challenge where we'll be inviting people to form teams and create, with those teams, go out and measure as many trees as they can. But that's on hold right now, given our current circumstances. So I'll be sure to let everybody know when that starts up again. And then my third job is that I work for an aging satellite mission, Terra, which is in its 20th year in orbit. So it is old. It's older than most of you guys, I'm sure. And maybe some of your siblings. But it's a pretty cool program. It's the flagship Earth observing satellite. So it was one of the first launch satellites to measure climate science and how Earth works as a system. So we spent a ton of time collecting this data, and there's 5 different sensors on that satellite where it measures different things about our atmosphere. So I just saw a study that came out where they were looking at carbon monoxide changes in our atmosphere, and that's not carbon dioxide, so it's not like the greenhouse gas that you think about, but carbon monoxide is that, silent but deadly and smellless gas that we all have, hopefully we all have alarms in our house to be able to see if there's anything that's leaking. But high up in our atmosphere, we're not up there to breathe it, so it's not like dangerous to us up there. But it does work with methane, which is another gas that you guys are probably aware of if you've ever been around farms, because you can smell a lot of the methane, kind of stinky. But methane is also a pollutant, and carbon monoxide leads to the lifetime of how long that pollutant stays in our atmosphere. So it's a lot of measuring how much pollutants are in our atmosphere. A lot of also another instrument that's on it is MODIS, which is a long-running program where we look at different types of land cover. It also measures sea surface temperature and land surface temperature. So some of those, oh, it's the hottest year on record measurements all come from that data set. And along with that too, like I was mentioning, looking at the different land cover pieces, we can see a lot of different change that's happened over a bunch of different years. So it's a pretty amazing satellite to be part of. There's another part of it that measures volcanoes and monitors when they might erupt. And then also gets a little bit of a closer look. So that's the cool thing with satellites, is that you'll have all these different instruments on it that all have these different jobs that all kind of work together to show us a better picture of how Earth works as a system. It's been pretty amazing to see. Some of them even you can turn and point it and then get a really close-up view, and others were designed to see a big column. So there's this one called Miser, which has 9 camera angles that make you get this entire stereoscopic view. So you get like this 3-dimensional view of what's going on. So you can measure things like how high the volcanic plume is after a volcano erupts, or if there's a wildfire, how high the smoke goes from that. So it's pretty cool. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh no.
I'm sorry, I had issues with my audio, so.
Oh, okay. That's good. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't me that was frozen. I just saw a note in the chat saying that it's still frozen, and I was hoping that it wasn't me. So
No, it was me.
well, that's good, I guess. So yeah, I have a really, really cool job. I get to wear a lot of different hats. I get to use my background in, I used to be a science teacher, but before that, I actually worked as, I was a language arts teacher. So I actually am trained to teach English and language arts, but after realizing that that was not what I wanted to be doing with my life, and that I should have listened to my heart instead of my parents when I was in college, I would have gone and got an earth science degree. So later on, I got my master's degree in earth science from Mississippi State University. And so now I get to write about science and kind of mesh together a lot of my interests. So it's been really, really amazing. And then I also get to work as I get to volunteer as a Girl Scout troop leader sometimes.
And that is so awesome. Now,
Yeah.
for our attendees, do you have any specific questions for Tasia? If you do, we encourage you to please write them in the question box, and we'll answer those as soon as we can. But a great part of what Tasia does is that she allows us to have female representation at NASA. So could you tell us about how it is so important for us to connect what we're doing as Girl Scouts, what they're doing as Girl Scout ambassadors, to helping forge a new generation of females in STEM?
Yes, it is very important. We need you desperately. One of the first days I went into one of my first meetings with all of the top level scientists that I work with, I was one of 2 women in the entire room. And it's not uncommon. It's getting to be much, much, much more common to see women and women in leadership roles as well. So it's in the works. People are recognizing some of the great work that women have done and that we can do and that we can strive to continue to do. But it's been interesting to be around and watch the transition. And I understand that a lot of the women that are in those roles now have been breaking down barriers for years and not giving into the norms, especially in the generation that they were in. Many of the women that I work with that are up high in those leadership roles are in their 60s, and some of them in their 70s even. So it wasn't a very common thing for them to be part of that, but they have inspired so many people, including myself, to be able to do science, do it well, and know that we can do everything just as well as the boys can, and then sometimes better.
All right, so part of step 1 within our badge requirements for today is to design a habitat for an alien world. And briefly, Kelly, Lauren and I were talking about getting started and using our example. So we've asked our attendees to have some recyclable materials with them today as we start brainstorming ideas for designing your habitat. So any pointers that you want to give us today? For example, maybe what is a habitat?
So a habitat has to be somewhere where a person, or I believe you guys are designing them for aliens, so wherever your life form can live. So there needs to be shelter, there has to be food, there has to be something for them to drink. And then, there was one more piece of that I am totally forgetting right now. Do you know what else it is for a habitat?
I don't know.
No, okay. But it's got to be somewhere where anything can live, right? Because if you're designing something for life, like my habitat is here in my house, where I have, food, shelter, water, all the things that I need, and I have, that's what it is, space. We need enough space to be able to live somewhere, because if we're living in tightly wound up balls, we're probably not going to thrive for very long. So whatever organism you are designing your habitat for would have to have those things: ample room, food, shelter, and water, or whatever hydration system your particular organism drinks. So you can use your creativity in this one. We study other planets because we want to see if they're habitable and what kind of different things they have there. So for example, Mars has a really thin atmosphere, which makes it so that we wouldn't be able to breathe. And if you were to go to, say, Venus, you'd get a lot of carbon dioxide and methane and a lot of those greenhouse gases that make it really, really hot. And they're also not very good for us to breathe. But if you had an organism that thrives on those gases, that those are the gases it needs to create have their whole cellular structure work, then that would be great. That'd be a great habitat for them. And that's one of the reasons that we have things on Earth like extremophiles that live in some of the coldest or hottest or most light deprived places, is because that's what they need for their bodies to be able to live. It doesn't always sound the best to me. I like sunshine, but I'm also not a single-celled organism living in the middle of a volcano, for example. So those are the big things about a habitat. But I hear that you guys are supposed to be designing them in shoe boxes, doing a diorama to kind of come up with your own habitat, and then be able to explain what this imaginary planet or habitat looks like and why it works for your alien. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
That is super cool, because it's a great way to merge art. And I know this one really loves art. So, but it's a great way to merge art and science, because you have to dream it to be able to figure out what's going on. You got to always be able to think outside of the box, because sometimes the answers aren't going to be as simple as you think they are. Even when simple answers make sense, sometimes it's important to be able to think about what kind of other things might be going on as well.
Thank you so much. And we wanted to also note to our ambassadors joining us today that this project, this badge actually will take a period of time. So we would like to do a part 2 with this badge requirements webinar, showing the girls some examples. Hence, we have Lauren joining us today to show us some examples of what she's done. And we wanted to also make sure that the girls include their interests, their personal desires, and thinking about if they were an alien trying to survive, what would they need, all of those key components in their design. And I think that, Lauren, we're not able to see you, but we can hear you. So do you have any done for your habitat?
I can explain mine. I'm sorry. I keep trying to work.
Did you try it?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to work, and I mean, I don't know what's wrong with my thing. I'm sorry. I've had issues with audio. I have the webcam on for me. I don't know why it's not showing. Okay, now I'm turning it back on and off and seeing if that works. All right, since that's not working.
Does it
All
work
right,
if I stop sharing mine?
I have no idea. I don't know what's wrong with mine. Interesting. Weird. I don't know what's wrong with I guess I'm having technical issues. Okay.
I was gonna say, if you want to buy a couple more minutes, I would gladly show you guys a science demo if you're interested.
All right, that'd be great, Tasia.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me grab my stuff. I think I have most of it here. Lily, do you know where my 2-liter up there is? All right. Sorry, Liz. All right. So this is really the fun part of my job that I really like to do. I used to work as a museum educator, so I used to get to do a lot of really cool demos a lot when I was younger. So this is a demo that I like to do to teach people. So if you're ever working with kids, or if you guys yourselves are interested in doing this because it's fun and it's kind of a magic trick, we're going to do a cloud in a bottle. So all you need to do it is an empty 2-liter bottle, some rubbing alcohol, and then a bicycle pump. Yes, or if you happen to, you can also use one of these soda savers, or fizz savers, I think they're called. But they just screw onto the top of your 2-liter bottle, then you can pump the air out of it by squeezing the ball. But we'll use the bike pump because that's, I think, what most people have on hand. So I rigged this one with a stopper, rubber stopper. So I just put the little needle thing through the end of the rubber stopper. If you don't have one of these and your parents happen to have like a wine cork laying around or anything like that, you can actually put the cork in the microwave for about 15 seconds and it'll expand a little bit. And then you can take like a ball pump needle and stick it through the wine cork, and that'll work just as well. Just make sure that the part that puts the air out gets on the other side of the cork, because you're going to want to pump that air inside your bottle. So to do this experiment, you want to do it? Okay. We just add a little bit of rubbing alcohol. You got it? We're just going to do a little splash. Cool, that's probably enough. There's a little bit left in here, I think, from the other day even. And then I just swirl it around because we want to coat the outside of our bottle, because when it coats more of the surface area, it starts to evaporate faster. That's a surface ratio to substance ratio thing that you need to be able to figure out how fast it'll evaporate. But that's the super sciencey part of it that we don't actually need to figure out. We just need to know that it's going to evaporate and put a bunch of little molecules in the air in here. And what we're going to do next is put maybe the cork inside our bottle really tightly. So Lily, will you hold the cork for the bottle? I'm going to put on my goggles because I can, and they're fun. And eye protection is really important. And since you don't have goggles on, Lily, we're going to give you.
I can close my eyes.
No.
I don't want sunglasses.
Okay, you want my goggles?
Fine.
She gets sunglasses. Eye protection, it's very important. We want to be safe.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to hold the cork though against it, because otherwise this bottle will fly off, and that's why it's so important to have the eye protection. All right, can you hold it up a little bit so they can see? And as you can tell, it's really squishy right now. And if you were to look at the temperature, it's about 60 degrees or 20 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure, this thermometer is not the most sensitive, so it may not pick up all of the difference in the temperature change. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pumping some air into the bottle. So we are going to increase the pressure inside the bottle. All right, you got it? All right, we are increasing the pressure inside this bottle. Ooh, it's gonna get harder and harder to pump here. All right. So now you can tell I can't really squeeze it at all. Pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to let all that air escape by opening up the end here. And once I do that, the pressure inside the bottle is going to decrease, and it's going to decrease really rapidly. And when pressure decreases like that, temperature also decreases. They're directly proportional is the fancy math term for that. So when that pressure or the temperature decreases, all those molecules that are in the air from the evaporation of the rubbing alcohol that's in here are going to start to condense. So that just means that they're going to get closer together. So, and I think we might have Kelly joining us here soon. So, no, sorry, Lauren. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to let that pressure out, and we are going to get a cloud in a bottle. And inside, the temperature is actually going to be slightly colder. You guys ready? 3, 2, 1. Woo! There we go. It's a cloud. It's a cloud in a bottle. And if you were to actually stick your finger inside, it's actually a little bit colder. And actually, I don't know if you can tell now, but it says that it's closer to the 64 degree mark. So you can actually see that it did get just a tiny bit colder. But that is cloud in a bottle. And that is one of the fun things I get to do as part of my job, is go around and do that, and then teach people about how satellites see clouds and how you can help us by being a globe observer and taking cloud observations from the ground, looking up above, because satellites can't see through all of the cloud layers, and there's a lot of different clouds that can be going on underneath a really thick, higher level cloud layer that the satellites can't see through. So your photos and globe observations help us fill in some of those gaps that the satellites don't get all the information from.
Thank you, Tasya. That is wonderful. 2 things from that. One, I'm seeing how you're using that recyclable bottle. That could be an element to the girls' habitat. And in addition, I know we're talking about careers and what you do at NASA. So for those of us that are joining us today, in the question box, type in what are some of your future ambitions as your ambassador. You're in high school level, so what are some of your career goals that you have? And while we're waiting on those responses, Lauren, did you want to go ahead and share with us your model habitat that you designed?
Yeah. Can y'all see me?
Yes.
All right, good. Okay. So I was gonna do a lot more use artistic materials, but I know that not many people have it. I did realize that I had modeling clay, so I used a lot of modeling clay instead, and I had a shoebox. So then I have this, kind of hard to see just a little bit. So I used modeling clay to make a river, and I used some recycled fabric that I have. I have leftover fabric because I made the Hogwarts stuff, so that's what I used for that. And I have these little mushrooms. I made these giant mushrooms. And then I have my alien too, which is, blessed, it doesn't look very good because I use modeling clay and I have very big fingers. But it's supposed to be kind of like a cat person, because it's the place where my habitat is much more darker than our Earth is, but it still has, like, it's very naturey and such. But because it's so dark, you kind of need to be able to see in the dark as well, and cats can see better in the dark than we can. So that's what I did. And the reason why I have mushrooms is because these mushrooms actually glow in the dark. So there you go. That's just a little bit about mine. So.
All right, thank you so much, Lauren. And Lauren, we have a few responses. So we have Breland, she wants to be an occupational therapist. So this is kind of for you, Tasya. How can all these careers integrate with what NASA already does? We have Madison, who wants to be an orthopedic surgeon, but she's considering pharmacy. We have someone foreign language. They want to major and become a foreign language expert in linguistics, physics, and wants that she can work in NASA in any kind of way. So how are those career interests integrated or can be integrated with what NASA is doing currently?
So I'm just going to plug this. NASA is apparently the #1 government agency to work for, and I wholeheartedly believe that. My husband works for the Forest Service, and it's not nearly as much fun, and they're not necessarily as great to their employees, honestly. But I think one of the things that makes NASA awesome is that there's so many different jobs that you can do. So we hire educators, real estate agents, lawyers, we hire doctors, especially because of the astronaut program. We definitely need doctors because we need to be able to, especially now that we're looking at sending people to Mars, we need to be able to identify what kind of effects being in space for that long has on people and how they'll be able to be when they come back. Because being in space is very taxing on people. If you've ever seen an astronaut after they land, they're usually like wheeled off in like a wheelchair or cart, because it's hard for them to walk. They haven't been in gravity for very long. So even though they're doing some strength training, like resistance training while they're in space, it's really, really tough on their bones, because they aren't getting that kind of muscle that supports their skeletal systems or musculoskeletal systems. So the healthcare part of it is actually really, really important. We have a chief medical officer as part of NASA, who I've been getting, yeah, we do, who I've been getting a lot of emails from recently, agency-wide. So that's a really fascinating part of it. And also, again, too, like pharmacy, they need to know, what kind of chemicals people are putting in their bodies. And, if somebody is having some sort of an issue while they're in space, it's not like you can be like, hey, let's pop on over to the supermarket and get some aspirin for my headache. You can't do that. You have to have everything that you need with you. And granted, they get some refueling supplies, but they don't always make it. And they don't always show up when you think they're going to, because rocket launches also get pushed frequently, just because of the weather is a big one, or if there's other things that are going on. There's definitely, I'm just going to put in here the link to the Globe Observer as well. I believe that's it. All right, that should take you, I think that works. I was just sharing the link to the Cloud Observer and the Globe Observer link, so you guys can go ahead and check that out on your own time, while you're doing all these educational things right now, I'm sure. So there's a lot of jobs. It turns out actually that my my husband's grandma used to work at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is where I work out of. And she worked doing real estate transactions. She would figure out how to, Dixie. Anyway, so she would buy or help the government buy property to develop the different buildings where different research would happen in. And I gotta tell you, there are some really fascinating buildings on campus when I do go. We have a giant vacuum chambers, satellite-sized vacuum chambers that fill entire buildings. There's the centrifuge thing that spins around because they have to put satellites on the end of these spinning things to see if they'll sustain being launched into space, because space is harsh. It's really harsh, and getting there is really, 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 really harsh. Because you're going through all the atmosphere and then getting out into space where there's no atmosphere, but it's really cold. There's actually seamstresses that are employed at NASA that they sew space blankets, which I think is the most wonderful thing. They're made out of this really bright orange, shiny material, and it insulates the satellites while they're in space because it is so cold. So it reflects some of the light off at one, then it's really hot when the sun's actually shining at you too. So it's really goes between a lot of different environments. So that they're a really fun shop of people working in the basement of a building, actually. Just sewing space blankets, which I didn't think was really a thing until I met them. But NASA employs a lot of people. I've always been really impressed with it. And then physics, there's definitely the engineering crowd. The flight operations team that I work with, they're the team that never sleeps, I say, because they're always looking for people, or they're looking for space debris. And so if anyone's ever seen the movie Gravity, it is there. Things like that do exist. There is a satellite that was exploded that they have to look out for. And there's also micrometeoroids, which my satellite actually got hit by a few years ago. So yeah, it took out a battery, but the engineers on my satellite were like, oh no, what are we going to do? Because one of the batteries isn't functional. And it wouldn't work because the thermal supply to it wouldn't work. So it wouldn't keep it warm enough to keep operating. But the engineers were like, oh, I got an idea. What if we just cycle the battery? So if you've ever like had your cell phone plugged in and it's gotten like hot and then it gets hot, or or if your computer's running really, really hard, sometimes it gets warm. They actually figured out how to cycle the battery at particular intervals to keep it warm enough to continue to operate. So that is how they keep that battery running, because again, it's not like they can go swap out parts. So it's been pretty fascinating listening to all of these people. We also work a lot with the Department of Defense when we launch satellites. So I got to go to the Landsat 9 launch, or Landsat 8 launch, sorry. Landsat 9 is in the works right now, which is a land monitoring satellite. But I got to go a few years back, and it was at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Yeah, so we got to go and watch it, but there was a bunch of people there that are working with the military as well, and they basically give us our go, no go. And one time there was a satellite mission that got, they couldn't launch it on time because there was a boat in the water just a little bit far off. So there's people that are looking for that too. Just make sure that people,
Oh, really?
wherever they're at.
That's so
So
cool.
it's pretty cool. There's just so many jobs. If you can think about a job, I almost guarantee that there's one at NASA. There's also people that just buy things.
Oh, very cool.
And
I
support
got
the
19 people on. Good.
a friendly face and you're really organized, that's another thing that you can do as well. And it's been pretty amazing. There's also somebody that moves people's offices around, which sounds like a really boring job, but it's actually pretty important because it makes sure that the people that work together are nearby each other as well. Although that's becoming less and less important as a lot of what we do is online, and we can do a lot of this teleworking stuff, which is why I'm really fortunate. I get to telework from Portland, Oregon, where I hang out in my basement as my office and then travel every once in a while to go and do different events.
Well, Tasia, I know as Lauren can attest, we are just so fortunate to have you here helping us with this badge. Lauren, do you have any other additional points? I know the other option for step 1 was to make a postcard or a tourist brochure. Do you have any recommended applications, Lauren, that our other ambassadors can use to do a postcard? I know you got started on it, so.
Yeah. So with the postcard, you could either do it digitally or you could do it on paper. I personally am the type of person that likes to do things on paper, and I have a lot of leftover postcards from school and such. So that's something that I could do, but I write really big, so I actually don't really use postcards as much. I would actually use a regular sheet of paper, but you can do it digitally. Thing I would suggest, and I think many people know how it works, is Canva. That's something that a lot of schools might show you how. If you don't know how that works, then I can maybe try to show you how it works. It's really not that complicated. It's really easy. You could even use Google Slides, all types of stuff like that. It does not have to be on paper or something. It's just, personally, that's just how I work, and that's how my brain works. But for some people, they might want it to be very visually pleasing, and the technology, pardon me, I'm sorry. Pardon me. The technology helps them actually visually see that. And I mean, I know plenty of people that do that. And again, I know the postcard might be good for those people who aren't as artistically inclined or who do not like to draw or like do things like that, which is understandable. I have a lot of friends that don't like doing that type of stuff, so they would rather make a postcard.
All right. And just one last question for those of us that are joining us today. When I think about a habitat, I think about other planets. So Tasia and Lauren, if you could go in our audience joining us, if you could go to any other planet right now, where would you want to go?
Oh, I think it would be really cool. I know I just think it'd be really cool to go to Jupiter. I don't know why. I've always been fascinated with Jupiter. Like, I think it'd be really cool to go to Jupiter. And I know it's like maybe potentially dangerous, but I think that'd be fun.
Jupiter is an awesome place. Actually, fun fact is that we have Jupiter to thank for not getting hit by a bunch of asteroids all the time because it's so big that its gravitational pull sucks them all in before they get to us. So I think Jupiter is a pretty good solid one to be thankful for and to visit. Although I don't know, wear a big suit that makes you not get hit by meteorites.
Yeah.
I think I would go to a moon. I would really like to go and visit Europa. I want to see what's underneath that ice and see if there's actually water. But I don't know. I also kind of really want to go to Mars too, because it would be
That's
cool
cool.
to see if that salty brine water is anything, and if there's anything that lives in it. I don't know. I'm just excited about the whole prospect of being able to see what else is out there.
Mhm.
All right.
And then maybe I'd visit Pluto because I kind of miss it as being a planet.
Well, our next steps for the badge is to explore your interests, to dig a little bit deeper as it relates to space, career focuses, and in addition, telescopes and how telescopes are used. And actually, one of the choices is to actually make your own. And then last but not least, share what you've learned through social media, through our Facebook page for both councils, and just engage with others about what you're learning about NASA in space. So again, on behalf of our Girl Scouts of Mountains to Milllands in Eastern Carolina, we thank you again, Tasia. I know it's really early where you are at for joining us. And thank you again to Lauren Stover from Troop 2900. And thank you to everyone else that has joined us this morning. We hope you enjoyed our webinar, and we'll stay tuned to us next with our 3 p.m. fun activity on our Facebook Live. All right, thank you, ladies. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining, guys. Go science.
Yay.
Girls. It's a pen. How come you didn't tell me that you had a light up pen?